So hello and welcome everyone to the Energy Institute's Aging and Life Extension of Offshore Structures webinar. My name is Famida and I'm the Senior Training Officer here at the Energy Institute. I will be available here during the webinar should you have any issues or any questions. I'm just going to start off a little bit introducing the Energy Institute. So we're a professional membership body for those who work within the sector and across who have an interest in energy. A lot of work we do is to provide knowledge, skills, good practice across the industry, and we produce guidance documents, knowledge resources, events, training opportunities for our members. We've been working together with John, and Gerhard, who will introduce themselves very shortly in order to bring you this webinar, which will introduce you to our full training course, which we offer, and will give you an insight into the course. Just to let you know, the session is being recorded, and should you miss anything, I will send you a link to the recording after the webinar is finished. There will be a question and answer session at the end, so if you have any questions, feel free to save them for the end, or you can drop them in the chat box and we will try to answer them at the end. Can everyone please keep themselves on mute throughout the session, just so it saves any interruption. And stick around for a discount code at the end for attending the webinar. So the discount will be, you'll be able to apply for the main course. Other than that, I will hand you over to John and Gerhard, who are the trainers of this course. So over to you guys.
Well, thank you very much, Famida. I'm John Wintle, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. The objective of the next 40 minutes or so is to tell you something about an online course that we're running provisionally on the 29th and 30th of November. It's going to be run over 2 half days of approximately 3.5 hours each day. The course, as you can see, is on aging and life extension of offshore structures, and is based on a book that Gerhard, John, and Alex Stacey from the Health and Safety Executive published 2 or 3 years ago. I'd just like to share a moment, though, to introduce ourselves and say hello. So yes, I'm John Wintle. I was formerly with TWI, the Welding Institute, where I worked on offshore structures with regulators and operating companies, dealing with aging and life extension issues of their platforms. I currently a visiting professor at Strathclyde University, Department of Mechanical Engineering. So I'll now ask John Sharp if he would like to introduce himself.
Good morning. I'm John Sharp. I'm a visiting professor at Cranfield University, and I worked for a number of years with the UK Health and Safety Executive, where one of my responsibilities was structural integrity. I've worked as a consultant since leaving HSE, and I've worked for a number of organisations, including PSA in Norway. And I've also published a number of conference papers on aging and life extension, and I'm co-author of the book that John mentioned a little while ago. I think Gerhard's next in line.
Yes, Gerhard, would you like to say a few words?
Yes. My name is Gerhard Ersdal. I'm a visiting professor at the University of Stavanger, and also an employee of the Petroleum Safety Authority in Norway, which is an Norwegian organization similar to UK HSE. We have the same type of responsibilities as HSE has, the offshore division of HSE have. I've been working on aging and life extension and particularly for offshore structures for many years now, and is the main author or first author or whatever you call for the book that John showed, and I will take part in the beginning of this webinar, but I will disappear quite soon. unfortunately, due to other meetings.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Gerhard. I think it should be said, I think, before that the material of the webinar, indeed of the course, is based on guidance that the Energy Institute Aging and Life Extension Committee has produced, and also work that has been done within Norway, which Gerhard has been involved with. I've written some of the guidance for the Energy Institute. The course is over 2 days, consecutive days, roughly 3.5 hours each day. It's in 6 parts. First of all, going to provide an introduction to aging and life extension and why this is important for offshore structures. There'll be a session on relevant regulation standards, and we're going to mention those as part of this webinar. Aging factors and issues covers the main sort of degradation mechanisms. Assessment for life extension, which is day 2. Day 2 is largely about life extension, is what are the steps that need to be taken to justify extension of a structure beyond its original design life. There'll be a session on inspection and monitoring techniques, and also not mentioned there something on repairs. And finally, some of the particular aspects of managing structural integrity during the life extension phase. But we're going to touch on some of these as we go through this webinar today. Of course, during the course, we will go into each of these in a lot more depth. So I want to say first that the course is relevant to all types of offshore structure, whether these be fixed steel platforms of the kind there you can see on the left, or concrete platforms on the right. We'll also cover as issues to do with floating structures, FPSOs and the like in the top, and also it's going to the experience from oil and gas is very relevant to wind turbine structures, and there's now a whole range of these being put forward. Wind turbine structures are not on the whole old or yet to be aging, but they will be in a few years' time, and some of the measures that will be necessary at that stage will be covered within the course. Now this shows the number of North Sea oil and gas structures installed each year, starting from 1967. It was the early structures being the southern North Sea gas fields, and then in 1973 we saw Forties and the start of deeper water platforms. You can see that there's now a considerable number of structures that are exceed 25 years, the number being approximately 240, and all of these age doesn't necessarily mean that things are aging, but it is a strong leading indicator that they might be. So aging and life extension is very much a major topic within the UK sector of the North Sea, but it's also one that is relevant in other areas of the world. In Norway, for example, there's about 100 structures in the Norwegian sector, of which we estimate probably over 50% are now in an aging state. Even more in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, maybe as many as 1,000 structures. In the US, Gulf of Mexico, yet more again. And the number, and although they don't, these areas don't have the severe weather of the North Sea. They have corrosion issues, which mean that which need to be managed. Well, the bottom line relates to offshore wind, and we've now got over 4,000 offshore wind structures around the world. And if you look around the coasts of Norfolk, where I was recently, the whole horizon is covered with wind turbines. The number that are aging, many of these have been put in within the last 5 to 10 years, within the last 5 years, and certainly within the last 10 years. But some early aging issues to do with bolts are now beginning to be observed. Now, the course focuses, talks a lot about aging, but we need to really understand what we mean by aging, and there are different, and this slide illustrates that there are four different types of aging. There's the physical changes that may occur to a structure. These changes to do with its condition, its configuration, the loads. There may be modifications. The loading regime may have changed. The structure may have become cracked or corroded in some way, and they're probably quite easiest to understand. Then there are changes in what you know about the structure as it progresses through life. Information is obtained from inspection. There may be materials testing, but information can not only be gained, but it can also be lost. And this is particularly the case with regard to its original design and its fabrication records. And having new information or lost information is a form of aging. Of course, that's looking at the structure itself. We know we have to see the structure within the context of the industry, indeed of society, and of course, over the time, methods of analysis and assessment change. There are developments in standards and codes of practice, and the whole acceptance of what is sufficient safety by society and regulators can also change. Of course, now we're very much more concerned about the environmental impact as well as what one might call traditional safety, and this has a bearing on how we see the structure and what integrity management measures are taken to safeguard it. Finally, there's technological changes, for example, obsolescence, and the availability of spare parts. There's the compatibility of computer systems. Perhaps possibly analyses were done when it was being designed that cannot now be repeated for maybe different loading conditions, and maybe that the analysis then will require to be repeated using a modern code. So although it's quite complicated, I think that if there's one slide in all of this that I'd like you to remember today, I think it's this one, which really so you really kind of recognize within the aging when you're considering your structure. Now, this is the bathtub curve, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It plots the rate of anomalies, and an anomaly might be an aging issue. It could be a corroded area. It could be number of cracks, new cracks detected against time. And you can see here we've divided this graph into 4 stages. An initial stage where the fabrication and design issues are ironed out. Then there's a period of maturity where the rate of anomalies is constant, and there's no or at least rises very slowly. But then you get to a stage towards the end of design life where things start to happen, and the inspection is picking up cracks and other things, the leaks, and then finally there's what we call a terminal stage where the rate of these issues starts to increase. And I'm sure that you've all had equipment in your homes where you're simply catching up and trying to get through through the day. And of course, many these stages of life are very relevant to industrial equipment and structures. So these are some of the main types of physical age-related changes. Well, they're not the degradation, damage, degradation, damage are physical changes, modifications, repairs, information lost and new obsolescence. I think we've mentioned most of these previously. The course will actually go into these types of mechanisms in a lot more detail, covering marine corrosion and fatigue and how it's necessary to respond to defects detected and assess what actions to take. Now, I think, John, are you going to take over at this point?
Yes, I can take over. So following on what John's been saying, we're now looking at life extension, and as he's already mentioned, aging structures do experience damage and deterioration, degradation, and what's important is the assessment of structural integrity, taking account of these changes. And in the life extension phase, which we'll obviously be covering in this course, the important thing is how one can adequately manage integrity because of the increasing challenges towards the end of life due to the factors that John mentioned in the previous slide. The next slide, please, John. The course also covers different sorts of regulations, and we're just picking out two here, both for the UK and Norway. And in the UK, where there's a safety case regime, safety case is renewed every 5th year, and once a structure's reached the end of its design life, it's necessary for a modified safety case to be prepared, which includes the new issues due to aging and life extension, the aging processes, the relevant design parameters, and any changes into operating conditions. And during the life extension phase, the safety case is renewed every 5th year. In Norway, there is a single application for consent for the entire life extension period, and that's made at the end of the design life. And the use of the Norwegian facilities shall be in accordance with the facilities technical condition. That's part of the Norwegian regulations. So this is an example of the way in which the course will discuss different types of regulations that affect life extension. Next slide, please. And as well as regulations, the course covers standards that deal directly with aging structures. And there are 3 listed here: NORSOC N006, which is on assessment of existing structures and includes aging and life extension. ISO 19901-9, which is a relatively new part of the ISO suite of standards, that's dealing with structural integrity management. And then API-RP, the recommended practice from API to FSIM, which includes floating systems integrity management. And within that recommended practice, there's an annex on life extension. And in addition, as John has already mentioned, the Energy Institute produces a number of guidelines, some specifically addressing aging and life extension, and these will be mentioned during the course as well. The next slide, please. The importance of structural integrity, I think we recognize that the primary structure in an installation is fundamental to its existence. It can't be replaced and very difficult to repair. And of course, failure of the structure will in many cases lead to significant loss of life, possible pollution and emissions. And therefore, it's very important that the integrity of the structure is maintained, and it's vital for safety of people and the environment and maintaining production. And that's why this course concentrates primarily on structural integrity. Next slide, please. And the fundamental questions for this course, as it says at the bottom, are will aging be sufficiently safe? Will aging structures be sufficiently safe and able to function as intended in extended life? And how can this be demonstrated? And those two questions will be covered during the course. So moving on, please, next slide. Managing structural integrity includes a number of factors. As you can see here, it includes surveillance, inspection and monitoring to detect if there are any changes from aging. If there are anomalies, how those are evaluated. The assessment of structural integrity based on the surveillance and evaluation of the anomalies, both now and in the future. Is it necessary to have any strengthening and other mitigations? And finally, during the whole of the aging and life extension period, data management, of course, is important, and looking for trends and analysis of that data. Next slide, please. These are a series of slides which demonstrate a flow diagram during the life of a structure. And on the left, you have two ellipses, one covering design and fabrication right at the beginning of life. The one below that is the operation and structural integrity management during the main part of the life. We then move to what is said is the as-is state at the end of the design life, what state the structure is in at that point. And then the three circles to the right of that, which cover assessment, mitigation, and structural integrity management tailored for life extension. And those three really form the core topics for the course. And if we move on to the next slide, we're now looking at the operation and structural integrity management. And this is basically to understand how structures change as they age, physical and non-physical changes, as John described previously. How do we determine its condition? Survey, inspection and monitoring. How do we evaluate and assess the significance of anomalies and any damage detected? How anomalies and damage can be repaired or mitigated if needed, and how to plan for these activities in an efficient way. Moving on to the next one, which follows in line. We've now moved to the end of the design life, and we're in the first stage of the looking at life extension. That's assessment for life extension. And this is an assessment to demonstrate integrity for the life extension. And we consider it as a 5-stage process, which is in the next slide. These are the 5 stages that are part of the assessment for life extension, and these are based on what is on the Norwegian standard N006, and it includes understanding the history and the present condition of the structure, which is obviously important. It's on the basis of that can one predict potential future changes and degradations, assess the integrity of the aging structure for the life extension period, decide based on the information whether the structure is fit for purpose, is further inspection required, is repair or mitigation needed, or in the worst case, is the structure obsolete and may have to be decommissioned. And finally, the 5th stage is to plan and perform future surveillance, inspection, monitoring, repairs and mitigations. It's a planning process looking towards the future in the life extension period. Moving on to the next slide, please. The course includes a part of the discussion on inspection, different means of inspection, and this really is using the bathtub curve that John described, looking at the different types of inspection during the phases of the structure. At the early stages, after installation, it's normal to do a baseline inspection to determine the initial state of the structure and determine whether there's been any damage from the installation process. During the mature phase, when the rate of damage is minimal, there are periodic inspections, often on a sort of 5-year timescale, to determine if there are any operational defects. And then as we move into the aging and terminal phases, there are special inspections required to determine an increasing number of defects and the rate of aging. And that's a very important aspect because the rate of aging is generally not known, and the inspections at various points can determine whether the installation has moved into the aging phase. Next slide, please. We're now moving back to our flow diagram, and we're into a situation where mitigations are necessary. Anomalies have been found, and those mitigations could include repairs and replacement, restriction of the loads on the installation, demanning in severe weather, for example, and reanalysis to get a better understanding of the state of the structure, and possibly further inspections. And these mitigations will be described during the course. There is a part of the course, as I think John mentioned at the beginning, will cover repairs and replacement. Next one, please. And this is the final stage, which is understanding the structural integrity management in life extension. And as you can see, it's the last circle we have there. And it is managing how one manages the increasing rate of aging issues as the structure gets older. Then we expect aging to take a bigger part, and being able to manage that is a very important aspect of the structural integrity management. We expect an increasing rate of defects, and we need to be able to detect them. And it is possible that there is what we call widespread damage, a number of which is damage in several related locations. And for example, it's possible to have fatigue cracking in a number of locations close together. One individual fatigue crack may not be important, but a group of them in one location could have a more significant effect, and it's necessary to understand that. And then if there are previous repairs and mitigations, then it's important that those are monitored during the structural integrity management. So the course itself will cover all these particular aspects, and we hope that you'll find these useful. And I think John will now talk a little bit more about the programme itself.
Yes, well, thanks, John. We've touched on all of these during the course of this webinar, and I'd just like to sort of present this as a sort of summary of what the course is going to contain. So the first session is the introduction, and we've seen about the types of the structures. We'll talk a bit more about the demographics, and again relating that to particular types of structures. The course will share some case studies of where structural failures have occurred, and some of the reasons why. And we'll also discuss the drivers for life extension, the economic drivers, the environmental drivers, and potentially alternative uses to which old platforms can be put. The next session will discuss the codes, the regulations, codes and standards in a lot more detail than we've been able to cover in this course, and particularly the ISO 19909 standard, but also we'll also mention some of the recommended practices that deal with are relevant to aging and life extension produced by API and DNV, particularly the recommended practice dealing with fatigue assessment. And finally, we're going to highlight some of the guidance that the Energy Institute Aging and Life Extension Committee has produced. You can see this guidance on the Energy Institute website. There's a whole list of different documents now, covering topics such as just the aging issues and life extension itself of structures, but also things covering things like caissons, impact damage, risk-based inspection. The course is really focused on the structure, and it has to be said it does not cover pipelines specifically. But I'd like to draw your attention to this, the guidance produced by EI, and during the course we will refer to it at different points. The third part of the course, the end of the first day, discusses the different degradation mechanisms and types of damage, and the causes, and where these might be found, and what the implications might be. Things like well-toed cracks of tubular joints, how these might be repaired, rates of crack growth, and so on. We'll also be spending a bit of time discussing the impact of the other changes, the non-physical changes, that is the technological changes or obsolescence, the changes as a result of loss of data. Many older platforms have changed hands, and the original design records have not been passed over to the new owners. And there's a question as to how the extent to which the structure requires reassessment, and particularly reassessment to using modern methods and modern standards. So that's roughly what day one is going to contain. There'll be about an hour or so on each one. The course will be run in quite a relaxed and interactive way. Day two covers the the question of whether it is safe to extend life beyond original design life, and discusses the types of analysis that that one might do for strength and fatigue assessments, the sort of data inputs, and determining whether or not it is safe to extend life. There'll be a session on inspection and monitoring. John's already referred to that. It'll cover both the types of inspection and monitoring for steel structures and also for concrete structures. And we will highlight some of the inspection methods that that are available, and particularly methods that would be used at different stages of life. Finally, the final session is about managing integrity during the life extension phase. And here we're going to cover risk-based inspection planning, what the role of the structural engineer is during this, and some of the other disciplines that might be brought in, and finally some of the techniques for repairing of structures, be these repair welding, the use of clamps, of composites materials, and during these days there will be opportunities for to examine some case studies. If course attendees wish to bring along examples of issues or particular successful remediations that they've done to share with the rest of the class, then that would be most welcome. So that gives you a summary, a flavour of what the course is. By the end of it, we hope that you will be able to consider your structure and know and recognise what the main aging issues are with it, having from a menu or a palette of possible issues that could affect structures in later life. You'll know what the steps are in assessing whether a structure it has integrity for life extension, be that within the UK regulatory regime of a 5-year rolling safety case, or the Norwegian regime where the period of life extension is specified at the end of the original design life. You'll have some awareness of the analysis methods that for degraded structures, methods for determining the strength where structures have been degraded, methods for determining fatigue life, and where there is multiple fatigue cracking, and that leads on to developing the SIM plan for late life structures, which we've just referred to. We're going to cover inspection repair, as I've said, and finally there will be this appreciation of the regulatory expectations. Gerhard is an active regulator. John has worked with, and I have worked with regulators in the UK, and we feel we understand what they are looking for, particularly from exercises like the HSE KP3 campaign, which we will refer to. Standards, good practice, available guidelines. I think we're going to touch on these at different points during the course. So to wind up, really, we're planning to run this course on the 29th and 30th of November, which is not far away, and we've reserved these 2 half days, and those are the days that are shown on the Energy Institute website. And if we have sufficient delegates, then we will run it on these days as we've described. If we don't get quite as many, then we have the option to, or if the dates aren't suitable for you, then we do have the option to run it on other days. and that's a discussion that we would have nearer the time. It should be said that this course is adapted from an original course that was run successfully in Norway. I think it's now been run for the last 3 years, and we've had approximately 15 to 20 delegates each time, and and the feedback that's been received has been very positive. It is based on a book which you can see on the right-hand side. It's quite detailed, this book, and a copy will be given to all those who attend the course. That has been priced in. As I say, the course is based on current international practice and standards and the up-to-date Energy Institute guidance documents. So I'd like to conclude there and invite Famida to sort of first of all, to thank you for attending this, and to invite Famida to say a few words just to finish off about how you might wish to book for the course. So can I hand over to you, Famida?
Thank you, John and Gerhard, for the webinar, and thank you everyone for joining today. I hope you found it useful and informative. So yes, as John mentioned earlier, the course dates were on the screen. I will be sending everyone an email just following up. Oh, thank you for putting that up again. So yeah, I will be sending an email to everyone to follow up with a booking link on how you can book for the full course, also prices, and also for attending the webinar today, you will receive a 20% discount. So that will be in the email as well. And any questions you have, we'll open up the floor in a moment. But yeah, all the information I'll send through with an email, also with the recording of the webinar in case you missed anything. Other than that, thank you everyone for joining, and I will open up the floor for any questions. So feel free to raise your hand, pop it in the chat box, or unmute yourself and ask away.
So Famida, can I just ask, will the webinar be sent to all those that registered an interest in it?
Yes.
Great. So okay, that's good. Anyway, if anyone has got any questions, any technical questions relating to what we've said or the topic of aging and life extension, wants to make a comment or question about the course, then that now is your opportunity. So don't hold back.
Do you feel the course covers the right content? Is anything missing from that you would like to see included?
Was one question in the chat from Adesi. Is online course delivery an option? I don't know what the plan is there, Famida.
Yes, so we're actually running this as a virtual online training course, just so it gives everyone an opportunity from across the world to join us. So that is the way it is set. Again, I will send a booking link, also to our webpage, and so you can view all the information there as well.